Morning program. Her name is Sister Mary Ellen Lacy. She's also a daughter of Charity sister who has worked in the social service and social justice fields extensively throughout her life, especially in the area of healthcare and law. Recent work has included serving as a lobbyist on various issues at Network, the Catholic Social Justice Lobby, which provided her an opportunity to be one of the nationally recognized nuns on the bus. You may have heard of the nuns on the bus too. For those who don't know, a group of religious sisters toured the country advocating for the rights of the poor and for immigration reform over the course of 2 bus tours that took them thousands and thousands of miles across the country. Sister Lacy is a licensed registered nurse as well as an attorney, and she comes to us from New York, so I want to welcome her. Sister Mary Ellen Lacy.
Past the seeker, as he prayed, came the beggars, the hungry, the abused, the unwelcome strangers. And seeing them, the Holy One went down deep into prayer, and he cried out to God, "O loving Creator, how can you be so loving and still see this pain and do nothing about it?" Out of the long silence, God responded, "I did do something about this. I made you." Good morning. I am honored and excited to be here with you guys today. It is so humbling to see so many of you here willing to get involved in someone else's pain. The fight for immigration reform is a worthy task. Any injustice that chokes the potential out of even one brother or sister demands prompt, perseverant, nonviolent pushback. So I'm proud to stand with you here today. I'm humbled too, because as I look out, I see that you're very young people, and you did nothing to cause this mess. But still you are here, and you are prepared to work with us to reconcile the self-centeredness, the individualistic man-made laws, with the compassion of the moral code ordained by our God. I don't know who chose the date for this summit, but I think that it's particularly fitting on a day that we are anticipating Lent, that you have come together to enter into the pain of another person or a whole other group of people. Lent is a time when the Catholics prepare to spiritually re-enter into the death and resurrection of our Lord. On Good Friday, Jesus was crucified by politicians after the crowd demanded it. Even in Jesus' day, the crowd had to tell the politicians what to do. Have you ever considered, what if you were present at the first Good Friday? Do you imagine what you might have done? Do you think you would have behaved differently than those who cried out, "Crucify him"? What if you lived during the 1960 Civil Rights Movement? Do you see yourself marching with Martin Luther King, Dolores Huerta? Would you protest with Dorothy Day and Eamon Hennessy? If you had lived so many years ago, what do you think your level of involvement in these causes would tell your children about your faith beliefs and about your concern for other people? I suppose it's true we can never know what we may have done. But I think it's important to frequently ask ourselves how we think we will behave in the face of manifest injustice. How much sacrifice do you tell yourself that you would make because you believe in God and you believe in your duty to one another? One thing we can and do know is how we will respond to the civil rights violations and the injustices of our day. And we must ask ourselves, does our response match up with what we tell ourselves we would behave? We must be who we claim to be. So again, it's impressive to be with you here today, and stand proud today, because today you take a stand for others. As of today, you're on a journey, whether this is your first step or one in the many steps you've made for immigration reform. But you are on the journey to fulfill our forefathers' promise that all men and women are created equal with the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Every civil rights issue concerns those three inalienable rights. And every civil rights movement that was ever successful was won in large part because of the participation of young, self-sacrificing adults. I believe that the immigration reform and the plight of our immigrant brothers and sisters is the civil rights issue of today. But are we called to right wrongs that we didn't participate in causing? Or maybe we believe only tangentially affect us? People may ask you, why do you care? You're not an immigrant. Does anyone know what the first question that man asked God was? If you know it, shout it. Am I my brother's keeper? And God spent the rest of the Bible answering that question in the affirmative. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. We are given gifts by God, and we are to use them for the betterment of all His children. Ironically, now that our country is strong, gaining advantages from multicultural living, we want to pull up the drawbridge, as if to say, we have too much blessings. We don't want any more. And we also believe that our country is made rich by the multicultural people, the multicultural advantages that we enjoy. And yet, for some reason, we say no more. America is a nation of immigrants, and family-focused, comprehensive immigration reform with a practical and achievable path to citizenship is good for the 100%. As Rob said, my name is Sister Mary Ellen Lacy, and I was a nun on the bus. But before I was a nun on the bus, I was raised in Chicago, so it's exciting for me to be back here today. I was raised on the South Side. I did go to law school here, but I went to Marquette for my nursing school. Woo! And on every Saturday morning, there wasn't a Lacy who wasn't aware of what was going on in South Bend. So we had season tickets to Notre Dame football, so absolutely, yeah, go Irish. Today I work in immigration law. I recently worked as a federal lobbyist at Network, a national Catholic social justice lobby. And in 2012, we took our first bus trip. And the bus trip was in opposition to Paul Ryan's budget, which slashed many programs for the poor. But in 2013, we took a bus tour. And the idea was to increase awareness of the plight of the immigrant and the duty of Congress to act with mercy, justice, and with haste to implement comprehensive immigration reform. We traveled across the United States. We started up in Ellis Island in the New York, New Jersey area. That, as you probably know, is the eastern port of entry for most Europeans prior to the 1950s when it was closed. We went down the eastern border, across the southern border, and we ended up in Angel Island, which is the west port of entry for many Asians before it was closed in the 40s. We did this on purpose. It was a calculated path, and the reason we took this path is because it was important to show that immigration is not a brown issue. We hear that a lot, right? It's a Mexican issue. It is not about just Mexican people who come here. Immigrants come from all over the world, and they come from many reasons. To be certain, the immigration issue is not about laws. It's not about our security. It's not even about our precious economy. It's about people. It is about courageous, good people who either leave their countries trying to make a better life for their families, or they migrate simply to survive. Many individuals leave their homes in search of a better life because they suffer from political persecution, dire poverty, or environmental destruction caused by a more developed country. We see rampant inequality on the global scale. We also see that our trade practices and some of our policy decisions promote that inequity. Is anyone familiar with NAFTA? North American Free, everyone's nods, right? NAFTA took away the tariffs that corporations would have to pay to do business in other countries, in Mexico. And what it did was take our tax dollars and enable the American agriculture business to produce corn at an incredibly low rate. What happened was corn became cheaper to buy from the American agribusiness than it did to buy from the Mexican farmers. And because of that, 1.3 million farmers lost their businesses and had no way to feed their family or continue to live as they had previously lived. In the first 7 years subsequent to NAFTA's implementation, our undocumented or illegal immigration increased by 60%. You take away a person's right, or you take away a person's ability to provide, the natural instinct is you're going to go somewhere where you can survive, yes? Absolutely. We also see that government oppression and brutality in other countries. We hear China, Somalia, El Salvador. These run people out of their countries. People need to be safe. People have a right to be safe. Most recently, the U.S. war on Iraq. It's estimated that it's created 2 million displaced persons. 2 million refugees are without a home. And it's not just forces driving people out of their country. There's forces drawing people into it, right? We sold the American dream, didn't we? We told everyone, come here, we are the greatest. And now that people listen to us, we say, whoa, there's not enough for you. The factors that draw people in is the reality is that our agribusiness does need low-skilled workers. We claim to need more high-skilled workers as well. And we also have a reality of our own birth rate is dropping, right? The baby boomers are aging. Baby boomers aren't going to work, and they're going to be collecting Social Security. Well, who's paying in taxes to keep them survived? We need more people. It's a reality, and we know that, and we draw people into it. Unfortunately, our worker visa programs have not kept pace with our needs or our foreign policy. As we traverse the country on our bus, we encouraged our fellow brothers and sisters to fight, to raise their hands, to raise their voices for comprehensive immigration reform. The system is broken, and we repeatedly encountered the human casualties of this broken immigration system. And broken it is. Pope Francis speaks eloquently to the justice issues. Does everyone love this Pope? This is like the greatest Pope in the world, right? And he's Jesuit. And Francis, he loves the poor. This guy's great. Francis recently wrote, just as the commandment, thou shalt not kill, sets a clear limit in order to safeguard the value of human life today, we also have to say, thou shalt not, to a culture of fear, exclusion, and inequality. Such a culture kills. Sanctioned inequality skews our sense of what is important and where our duty to act lies. How can it be that it's not news that 6,000 people have died of exposure and dehydration along the southern border, while American border patrols shoot holes in the water jugs left by humanitarians? But it is news that Kim Kardashian may or may not have had butt implants. How can it be news? How can it not be news when 5,100 American-born children are in foster care, a number expected to grow to 15,000 by 2016 because their parents have been deported? But it is news, it's international news, that there are homeless puppies in Sochi. How can it be that it's not news when American corporations send recruiters for decades into third world countries to bring workers over here, to abuse them, to silence them, and then to discard them when they fear police discovery? But it is news that Jimmy Fallon is the new host of The Tonight Show. These are questions that should keep us up at night. But they are also the questions that get you up on a cold Saturday morning to fight for your brothers and sisters, to answer the call of God, to serve one another. Our current system leads to the undermining of people's dignity. It keeps families apart. and it makes people wait years for visas after the petitions have been approved. The system has resulted in a growing number of persons in the country who are in unauthorized capacity. They live in the shadows, and they do jobs that would otherwise go unfulfilled. Our nation's physical border enforcement strategies have far outlived their effectiveness, and they lead to the death of thousands of immigrants. I believe that we have an ethical, moral, and Christian duty to address the needs and the circumstances of our suffering brothers and sisters who are immigrants. But even if you don't agree with me on that, even if you don't believe that, you should want, and I know we all want, but I'm giving you an argument to give to others, everyone should want comprehensive immigration reform if for no other reason than straight up naked self-interest. Comprehensive immigration reform and a path to citizenship would be the most effective economic, ecologic, and pro-life piece of legislation that any Congress will ever pass. Common sense immigration reform will strengthen our U.S. economy. It creates jobs. Domestic product, a gross domestic product, will be exponentially increased. Tax revenue is estimated to increase by $4.5 to $5.5 billion in 3 years. The bipartisan Senate bill that was offered last year, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, when they scored it, anticipated that it would increase the legal workforce by 3.5% in 10 years and 5% within the next 20 years. When we were driving on the bus, we had opportunities to meet people. And what happened is we would go into a town and they would come to us and share their stories. And we were in North Carolina one time and we met with business workers. And we asked them, what's your thoughts on this? What does this immigration issue mean to you? And there was a guy there who was the director of the local real estate agency, the professional organization, and he said, sisters, what we know is that there are 11.8 million undocumented people. But what our studies and our research show us is that if they were made legal, if they felt safe to really commit, that they wouldn't fear deportation and losing their home, 3 million of them were poised to buy homes. Can you imagine what that would do for our economy? 3 million house sales? You've heard about Detroit going bankrupt. Has anyone heard what that mayor's plan is to get out of bankruptcy? Immigration, right? Make it legal. We see this all the time on both sides of the aisle. It's not an argument anymore. Immigration reform with legalization, which is accessible and reasonable, is good for the economy. There's really no argument on either side. Paul Ryan, who is the person we opposed in the first budget, or the first announcement on the bus tour, is right on this issue. He was asked by the Wall Street Journal, what do you think your job is? And he said, we need to create growth and good laws for America. And they said to him, well, what would you do? And he said, well, the first thing he would do is reform immigration. A stable, safe workforce and assurances of return and the ability to remain in the United States for subsequent harvests would enable the agriculture business to properly plant, to take advantage of optimal weather seasons, and to provide for rotation of crops. That's good for the ecology, and again, it's good for our economy. Finally, a roadmap that allows people to come out of the shadows, obtain medical care, report injustices, and amply provide for their family is nothing if not pro-life. So what would comprehensive immigration reform look like? Each day that passes when we don't fix our broken immigration system, it comes at a tragic human cost, and we miss opportunities. Our nation's immigration system right now is backwards. The only part of it working is the enforcement and deportation part. Our nation needs an immigration system that reflects our faith values and the needs of our 21st century. Right now, it seems to be reacting to our fears, doesn't it? We want to push people out because we don't know what to do. A system that would work for us is a system that would reunite the families, allow workers the opportunity to come forward without fear to pay their taxes and obtain legalization. A functioning system would serve the needs of our entire nation. So that's why we must call upon our Congress. We write letters, make phone calls, tweet. We do email petitions, any of these activities that gets the Congress to hear you. Remember, they can't act unless you tell them to. They work for you. You elect them, and they need to know that. They need to be reminded of that right now, that we're tired of the stalemate out there. We're tired of the politicking. When we call and we ask for comprehensive reform, what do we want to look, what would we like to see in it? First and foremost, we have to make sure that it ensures family unity. We know that families protect or promote healthy communities, healthy economies. When your family is with you, you're more able to adapt to a situation, you'll learn English, you'll become a greater, more fulfilled part of the community. Most immigrants have lived here greater than 10 years. These are not people just coming, they're not new. They're here, they're part of our communities, they're part of our families. While employment visas should be increased, we heard a lot about the House Republican principles. They released and they said that we need to stop focusing so much on this family stuff. We need to get more into our business. Well, that's obviously not right. But we do agree that we do need to increase the employment visas, but not at the expense of family immigration system. It's not a zero-sum game, and a lot of people would like to tell you that, well, there's a finite number of visas. We make up the number of visas we'll give. So it's not fixed for all time in stone. We do need to increase our employment visas, but not at the expense of the family visas. We need to increase both of them. Nothing is more oppositional to our Catholic values than the painful separation from our loved ones. Backlogs at the USCIS. Does everyone know how this works? When you petition for somebody to come over, you get approved, but then you have to wait for an available visa. If you are from Mexico or Philippines, and you've been made a citizen and you want to bring over your brother and sister, does anyone have any idea how long you'd wait? Go ahead.
20 years.
20 years. It's incredible. That's a heck of a goodbye when you leave your country, eh? When we were, the bad family immigration system that we presently have was highlighted for me when I was in South Carolina. We were speaking on the bus, and a young lady came forward. She was probably in her mid-30s. She had 3 kids. She said, "Sister, I'm getting deported." Her 3 children were American citizens. Her husband, who was also from Mexico, had already been deported. What happened with Angelina is she was driving her kids to school one day. She worked in the community. She had lived there for 15 years. She was part of the community. Everyone knew her. Dropping her kids off at school, she stopped to wait for a bus. She got rear-ended by somebody who was not paying attention. And when this happened, obviously everyone was concerned, a mother and 3 children. My goodness, we should come, we should help. And come they did. After a few minutes, they discovered she was undocumented and should not be driving. What do you think happened next? Did the concern for her continue to build? No. This is what happened to her. The man who hit her walked away. She was arrested in front of her children. She had no idea where her kids were taken. She said, "I asked, I begged. They just said, you don't belong here." They arrested her, and she didn't find out about her kids till the next day. She was put in deportation proceedings, and she was scheduled to be deported at the end of June. She asked she had to make the decision with respect to her 3 kids. Do I keep them with their mother and destine them to a certain life of poverty in a country they don't know? Or do I leave them here with relatives for them never to know their mother? That is not a choice that a Christian community forces a mother to make. That's outrageous. We need an immigration reform that promotes family unity. To be effective and fair, immigration reform should have a reasonable, accessible path to citizenship, and it needs to be free from undue punishments and fines and crazy requirements. It's important to support an expedited process for undocumented youth, like Veronica. My goodness, who wouldn't want more Veronicas in our world, right? But she also has to have the right to stay with her family. A lot of times we're hearing that the dreamers will be made legal without a right to petition for their family members. That's second-class citizenship. That is unacceptable. Proposals that would create a temporary legal status but deny individuals realistic opportunity to obtain citizenship cements that second class. We've had second class systems in the past, haven't we? We've seen the Japanese internment camps. We've had legalized segregation. And every subsequent generation has lived to be properly ashamed. We cannot let this happen. These proposals are not how Christians believe that they are expected to live out their duty to each other. Every year, individuals from around the world migrate to the United States, often at our invitation. They come, they start to work, but there's certain type of work requirements and who you can work for, and you can't change it. When this happens, you could find yourself out of a job and therefore deportable. We need a new system, or in the new system, we need to make sure we protect the workers' rights, give them equal labor rights, make it safe for them to be able to report terrible conditions under which they work. And we have to allow them to bring their families. Who would want to come here to contribute to our society if they have to be separated from their family? Comprehensive immigration reform must also address the root causes, right? We've just talked about NAFTA. We don't have to do business that way. We can do business that puts everybody on a level playing field. It's a myth that there always has to be a winner and a loser. There are many, many business opportunities and cultures that live when everyone does better. Truthfully, the fact is we all do better when we all do better. But we have to get away from that self-centered, it's all for me. We must acknowledge that the southern border is already secure. This is not something we hear about, right? All we hear is enforcement, border security. The southern border is secure for illegal immigration purposes. We need to stop listening to the lobbies of the private prison system, the Border Patrol, and powerful defense contractors. The terrorists who carried out the 9/11 attacks were not Mexican. Let me say that again. The terrorists who carried out the 9/11 attacks were not from the South. But yet within 10 days, President Bush established what? The Department of Homeland Security. And their first task was to secure that southern border. It doesn't even make sense. Over the next 10 years, we would see annual border spending triple. 1,900 miles along the border with Mexico would get an additional 650 miles of heavy-duty fences. There are approximately 165 truck and x-ray machines. We have twice as many law enforcement officers as we've had in the entire stretch. There's a small fleet of Predator drones. There are heat-seeking devices where if someone steps on it in the desert, it notifies the nearest Border Patrol. We have surveillance cameras and thermal devices and this and this and this, and it goes on. The program has done nothing, really, to affect human drug trafficking or terrorism. It has pretty much stopped illegal immigration to a point of where it's a zero-sum game, a net zero, which means as many leaving are coming. It is the lowest that we've seen in 40 years, 40-year low. So this talk about our porous borders and we need to spend more money on security, understand where that's coming from. That's coming from people who can make money off of it. Always follow the money. My father would always say, follow the money. But follow the money and that will show you why the business dealings are being made. Our politicians in DC have become arbiters of privilege as opposed to the responsible stewards of our nation's resources that they are elected to be. We must remind them that they work for all of us, and we want our laws to reflect our values, not our fears. We value the dignity and fairness that compassionate, comprehensive immigration reform will bring. one that unites families, creates a valid, reasonable pathway to citizenship. I know today may be your first step, or it may be the next step of many. Some of you are nodding. I think you know more than I do. As you move forward, though, you'll find that this will be a long fight for justice. And I want you to stay in that fight, because you're going to be who wins it. It doesn't end until we've accomplished the mission of freedom and justice for all our immigrant brothers and sisters. And I don't want you to be discouraged. And I'm going to share with you a little story that I know. That in a time when I was particularly discouraged, it made me fight. It made me continue to see other people. I was in a mission along a path where I had started to see that the people I was fighting with perhaps had their own self-interest. They were a little bit jealous. There was a little bit of infighting. And my sense of purity said, oh my goodness, this is not right. Look what's going on. And it became dark and dismal. So I began to consider, maybe I should take another route. Maybe I should have a different path. So I was home with my mother, and this was going through my head, and we went to Mass one morning. And it was the gospel of the 10 wise virgins and the 10 foolish virgins. Do you know that one? It's the story of the wise girls and the foolish girls are invited to meet our Lord, to come to the banquet. The wise girls, or the so-called wise girls, bring enough oil so their lights can be lit, their lamps can be lit when the bridegroom shows up. Now the foolish girls, they hear the call and they come running, but they don't stop to buy spare oil. So as the time passes, their lights grow dim. They run out of oil. And although they can see him in the distance, the foolish girls panic. They see the wise girl with the oil, so they run out and they get more oil. And you know what happens, right? While they're gone, the bridegroom comes, and only those present get to go to the banquet feast. This is usually taught by priests. Obviously, I'm not a priest. This is usually taught to teach us the preparation for the kingdom, right? But as I was sitting there conflicted about this mission that I was on, I thought to myself, wait a minute. Why are those foolish girls foolish? Because they heard the call of Christ and they came running. They didn't make any allowances for their own personal comfort. They didn't care about anything in the future. They were told to meet him there, and they came running. They answered the call. It may sound foolish to others, but is that not precisely what we are called to do? No, they're not foolish because in their haste to be with the Lord, they forgot to buy oil. They're foolish because they left that spot. They left the spot even if they saw him in the distance, and they left that place where he called them to be. They got scared. They saw others who had lights they didn't have. They were fearful maybe others had more. And in their haste to restore their worldly comforts, their own positions, their own reputation, they risked losing everything. Couldn't they sit in the dark a little while and push through it? The foolish girls are foolish because they strayed from where they were called to be. Something stirred in you today to come here today. I have to believe it was the Holy Spirit. Something guided you here to care about family and friends. What you may find in the future while you fight this fight, that not everyone agrees with you. Has anyone encountered any opposition thus far? Not everyone agrees with us, right? Show them off. If your hands aren't up today, they will be when you get more involved in this. Trust me. That's okay, because God is on our side. And like the kingdom of God, I believe that immigration reform will surely come. But also like the kingdom of God, our job is to hasten its arrival. Together we can do this. And if we, as I have said, and I'm sure many of you have said on so many lines of protests and marches and prayer vigils, sí se puede. Thank you.